I got some comments that some were not able to hear me this last time that I was speaking, so I just want to confirm that you all are able to hear me. Ross and Bree, are you able to hear me all right? Okay, great. Okay, it looks like we're getting some confirmation that a few can hear us, so that's great. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This is for the 136th Street and Cynthia Ann neighborhood meeting. I appreciate you all taking some time out of your busy lives to join us. So just a few housekeeping things. So this is a virtual webinar. So any communications are going to be through the Q&A chat feature. So that should be at the bottom of your screen. We've got a graphic kind of depicting what that looks like here. We'll have pauses in our presentation for the Q&A. So if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and then we'll pause at certain points in the presentation to answer those questions. Just to keep track of time, we may have to reserve some questions till the very end, but we will get to all of the questions that you ask in that chat. We are also recording this presentation. So for anyone who's not able to attend, we will be recording it and posting it online. That will be available until about the end of the month. So we've got a link here shown on this screen, this fishers.in/136 neighborhood meeting. That's where you can find this presentation. And then there's also a link to a survey where we're going to collect some additional feedback from you all. So again, we're requesting that feedback by February 28th. And we'll also post that link in the chat feature. So I just want to clarify what the purpose of tonight's meeting is. So tonight we're really looking to gather feedback on what type of development you all would like to see as property owners in this area. You may all have received some public noticing for a new development that's being proposed in the same area. That is for a new multifamily development. And that is a separate development that will be discussed at our Plan Commission public hearing. And that meeting is set for March 2nd at 6:00 p.m. here at City Hall. So that will be an in-person meeting. So I just want to be clear that tonight's meeting is separate from that public hearing. Tonight is really more of a general discussion with the neighbors in this area. And that meeting is focused on a specific development. So I've heard from some of you on this call regarding that development. So if you have any comments on that specifically, you can certainly contact our department, but that's really not the purposes of our discussion tonight. So I just want to be clear because I think there's been a bit of confusion with that. So just to go over the agenda, we're going to do welcome and introductions. We're going to give you an overview of really the planning department itself and our rezone process, what public involvement looks like with rezoning. And then the bulk of the conversation is going to focus on these different scenarios for development. So our team has put together 3 different iterations of concept plans. And what we are hoping to gather from you all is what you like about these certain concept plans and what you don't like. So they'll show different aspects and different uses within each concept plan. And so we're hoping to gather some feedback from you all. I do want to highlight that these are purely hypothetical. It's really just to begin the conversation of what development could look like in this area. So it does not reflect the city's desire or our future plans for the area. It is purely for the purposes of discussing what different various types of development could look like and what you all like about different aspects of that. And then we'll adjourn after that. So just for some quick introductions, my name is Megan Vukasic. I'm the director of the Planning and Zoning Department here at the City of Fishers. We also have a couple other panelists on the call. So we have Ross Hillary. He's the assistant director of our department. And you'll be hearing from him a bit later. And then I also just want to introduce our planner 2 for this area. Her name is Bree King. She's also on the call. And the way our department is split up is we have 2 planner 2s. One is dedicated for the area north of 116th Street. And then we have another planner in our department who's responsible for the area south of 116th Street. So Bree's area is that in which you all live, which is north of 116th Street. So she's on the call. I just wanted to introduce all of us as your local planning department. And just generally wanted to point out that we do have a generic planning email address. So that is shown here on the slide. It's planning@fishers.in.us. So if you have any general zoning questions, I would encourage you to contact that email address. Someone's always assigned to that and can answer those questions for you. So if it's a question on a fence requirement, or you're looking to build an addition on your house, certainly reach out to us and we can get you to the right place and answer any questions that you have. So I'm just going to give an overview of planning in general. So this shown here, this is our Fishers 2040 future land use map. So we have a comprehensive plan here at the city of Fishers, and every municipality is required to have a comprehensive plan, and that's really the long range planning document for a city. So we use it as a guide. It's not necessarily a policy document, but it is a guide for future decision making. So this was first adopted in 2016 and updated again last year. And so this ideally shows what the land uses for Fishers would look like in the year 2040. You can see that a significant amount of it is yellow. That is a residential development. And then you can see along I-69, we have more commercial development. Again, I want to highlight this is really a guide that we use for decision making. And when we're going through the rezone process, this does not reflect the current zoning of any of this property. And also there are scenarios where we might get a development that doesn't align with the Fishers 2040 plan. And really we have to look at a lot of different factors when evaluating our support for a rezone in that case. So this is just one resource that we use that kind of guides that decision-making process. And the full plan, the full comprehensive plan, that is available online for the public to view here at this URL. So that would be fishers.in.us/Fishers 2040. So I would encourage you all to go there and check it out. It's a great document with lots of information about the future vision for our city. And then just want to highlight that the area that we're here to discuss today is the area that is focused on 136 and Cynthia. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit to that area. So again, this shows in this image here, we've got Cynthia going north-south, 136th Street going east-west. And the area that we're going to focus on is really this intersection here. And our scenarios are focused on this southeast corner here. So what the Fishers 2040 plan designates this area as is a neighborhood service center. So what that means, it's really an area that's intended to provide daily retail uses and personal services to the community, the surrounding neighborhood. So it's not supposed to be a regional draw. It's really supposed to serve the existing residents in that area. So you can see the land uses that would involve this designation would be commercial retail, office, institutional, potentially upper floor residential, and then a community center or community open space. So those are just some potential suggestions that are given with this land use designation. Again, that is the vision for the area that we set out in the 2040 plan, not necessarily the reflection of the zoning today. So what is allowed today? So the current zoning is C2 commercial. So in this case, it does align with the Fishers 2040 plan. So this is the description of the C2 commercial district. So this area is actually it's zoned as a part of a planned unit development, but within that planned unit development, it allows for C2 commercial uses. And so that really is to provide for shopping, service, and family needs of the adjacent or local residential areas. So that would be what's allowed by right in that area today. And so if someone wanted to change the zoning to this parcel or really any parcel in the city, they have to go through what we call a rezone process. And there are 3 meetings involved with that rezone process. So the first is it would go to city council for just an initial presentation. Then it goes to our plan commission for a public hearing. So if you all have received those public notices for that proposed development that I spoke of earlier, that would be for our plan commission public hearing. And that really is the meeting that is reserved to hear public comments. So these other two city council meetings, although they're open to the public, they don't necessarily have a public hearing as a part of the item that's being discussed. So as a resident, if you do have concerns about a proposed development, Plan Commission is going to be the meeting that you would all want to attend. And maybe you guys have seen these public hearing signs around town. This is our public notice sign. So anytime we have a public hearing, there's certain notice requirements that have to be met, one of which is a sign to be placed on the property. So this doesn't always indicate a rezone. Sometimes there's other zoning requests that require a public hearing, but anytime you see this public hearing sign, you can always go to this URL. I'm going to go ahead and click on that just to show you guys an example. And it brings up our public noticing map. So any public notice that we have in the city will show up on this map. You can click on the point, which will give you some information about what's being requested. Here on the side, you'll also have links to, if you have any public comments associated with those items, you can go ahead and click on this and it will bring you to a form to submit your public comment ahead of a public hearing. Of course, you're always welcome to attend the public hearing in person, and you go up to the podium and you voice your comments there as well. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone on this call was aware of this resource. This is, if I close out of here, this shows the full picture of all the public hearings that we currently have scheduled for the city of Fishers. So as of right now, it's only 2. All right, so that was a lot of planning and zoning information that was thrown at you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here and see what questions that we have.
Hey, Megan. So as of right now, we have 2 early questions. I think one of them you might talk about later on with follow-up to this meeting. But Jamie asked, outside of multifamily development, can the area handle more homes with the current overcrowding of the schools?
Yeah, so anytime that we're introducing additional residents in the area, there's always concerns with traffic and then also with the school system. So just like the land use plan that I had shown earlier, which is our vision for land use, we also have a transportation plan, which identifies any road improvements that we anticipate needing through the year 2040. So we do have a plan in place for road improvements to accommodate the additional traffic. And our engineering department does a great job of really identifying the priority areas where those improvements are needed. And then with the school district, I don't know if I have too much insight on really how they, plan for the additional population, but I know with their redistricting, they do work closely with the data that we provide as a city about our population growth to make sure they're able to accommodate an increase in population. So I don't want to say anything that isn't accurate from the school side, but we do work closely with them to make sure that they have an accurate representation of how our city is planned to grow.
Good. Another question we have from Steve is, what is our impact really going to have on the decision for this land use? And that's why I mentioned, what are the follow-ups for this meeting?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to understand what residents and what property owners in this area would like to see. We're starting to see a lot more development out in East Fishers, and really probably the introduction of commercial potentially. And so we're wanting to gain feedback from you all as we evaluate these changes to zoning on what you would like to see. So we had this proposed development that I mentioned earlier, and we received a lot of public comments on it. And so council and the mayor really tasked our team with getting with you all and obtaining feedback. And so that's what we're here tonight to do. It's not necessarily that we're going to go out and rezone this land next week, but as we evaluate changes to zoning, having this information and feedback from you all is going to be helpful in just knowing, just like the Fishers 2040 plan, really just another resource for us as we evaluate these changes.
Good. Couple additional questions. Paul asked how many people are logged into the session. Paul, we currently have 90 people that are logged in. Matthew asked, what was the web address to see scheduled public hearings? That's fishers.in/public hearing, or excuse me, fishers.in/ us/notice. We'll put that in the chat for you guys. Another question we got, Megan, from Jeff and Patty. Is it possible to have a library branch in this area simply to receive or request books? So how would we work with our library system?
Yeah, so working with the library, that would be something, the library is a separate entity outside of the city of Fishers. And so if they were to construct some sort of library branch out in this area, it would really be on them to develop that land. Again, we could have some sort of partnership with the city as we support that development. But that would really be an initiative that the library would have to initiate themselves. We have seen, though, some areas of Fishers, I believe we have one at Holland Park. We have those little libraries, which I know aren't the same thing as a public library. But those are some neighborhood features that can also be added in a community. And if that's something that interests you, feel free to reach out to that planning department and we can help you through what approvals for something like that would look like. And Ross mentioned, real quick, if there's any more questions, the number of participants on this call. And I do want to say we hold public meetings quite often, and 90 participants is a record, at least for me. So I do thank you all for being here tonight. That's great. I love to see that. And it really speaks to our community.
Yeah, there's a couple more. We got a question. What are the plans for expanding 136th Street to 4 lanes or 2 lanes? And I know that answer, Megan, I believe they're looking at 136th Street right now. Will likely remain 2 lanes, but we'll have a median down the middle. So will not be 4 lanes. Another question we have is, do we think a Kroger would fit in a C2 commercial?
So a Kroger, a grocery store itself could be a potential use for a C2 district, but I believe that there in this zoning district, there's size limitations for how large a grocery store retailer could be. And so it would really just depend on the size of that Kroger being proposed. We'd have to look at the specifics, but a grocery store in general would align with that C2 zoning.
Good. Another question we have is, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, is the home at 136 in Cynthia Ann a historic home? Would the home be sold or moved? That was by Christine.
I'm not sure about a historic status on that home. If there is one, I am not aware of it.
Jamie asked, what would the reason to change the zoning at the corner of 136th Street in Cynthia Ann?
So if a proposed development came in that didn't align with the current zoning, then we would need to rezone the property. So if it was anything past that C2 description that I mentioned earlier, then a rezoning would be needed. And so any sort of introduction of residential, or if it was an industrial or anything above that C2 designation, a rezone would be required.
Good, and we got one more that we can tackle right now before we move on. This one says, is an I-69 interchange planned by NDOT at Cynthia Ann Road?
So as of right now, there is not an interchange planned at Cynthia Ann. Our thoroughfare plan, which is that Fishers 2040 vision I mentioned earlier, it does show an interchange at that location. But as of right now, our engineering department does not have any plans for that road improvement, nor have I heard anything from NDOT.
All right, we have a couple more, but I think we can move on.
All right, for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move on. But again, we'll come back. There's other pauses in the presentation, and we can come back to the questions and answers at the very end as well. All right, so now we're really going to jump into these different hypothetical scenarios for development. So what we're going to focus on is this piece of land here at 136th Street in Cynthia Ann. Again, I do want to stress, purely hypothetical. We put together 3 different concept plans that we're going to show you all. And then we have a survey poll that will come up and ask you guys questions on your thoughts on this development. So as we get started, I do have a test poll just to get us all familiar with this format. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. So this is just an intro question. You're going to see two questions that should pop up on your screen. The first is, are you a Fishers resident? And the second is, how long have you lived in Fishers? So if everyone wants to take a second and answer these questions. All right, it looks like we have about 10 participants that have not answered the question. So I just want to make sure we give everyone enough time to answer these. If anyone is having trouble answering these, please feel free to send us a note in the chat and we can help you sort that out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. And then I can actually share the results with you all. So it looks like on the call today, we've got about 94% of those participating are Fishers residents. And then for the breakdown of how long you've lived in Fishers, it's really even among the 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 20 years. And then we do have about 12%, I'll call it a longtime Fishers resident, 20 years plus on the call as well. So thank you all for participating in that. Okay, I'm now going to hand it off to Ross, who is going to give an introduction of these various concept plans.
Great, thanks, Megan. So like Megan said, tonight we are going to explore 3 different concept plans. These concepts are for the purpose of obtaining feedback from the community and are not intended to reflect the desired use for the development. Prior to exploring these concepts, we did want to provide a common language or definitions as part of our concept overview. So see here, these concepts will have 6 main different uses, which are single family, cottage homes and townhomes, commercial, detention ponds and waterways, and parks, buffers, and open space. Single family homes are detached, which means each home is separate physically from its neighboring property. They typically include a driveway, a 2-car garage, and they will have neighborhood amenities such as a pocket park, neighborhood pool, or an amenity center. The image that you see on the screen is an example of single family homes that are located in Britton Falls. On the concepts, these will be represented in yellow. Cottage homes are detached homes that share a common area, typically rear-loaded garages with shared amenities. Townhomes are attached homes, meaning they are physically connected to their neighboring property and typically have rear-loaded or front-loaded garages. The images here are an example of cottage homes that are located in Fishers and Anderson Hall, and townhomes in the Saxony neighborhood. And on the concepts, these will be represented as orange. As Megan said, there's a wide definition of commercial land use, but for the discussion tonight, we'll be looking at neighborhood service definition that Megan said earlier, which is found within the Fishers 2040 future land use section, which provides daily retail uses, personal services, and community gathering spaces. These would entail small retail spaces and office spaces and could support maybe a small grocery store. These will be represented as red. Detention ponds in our waterways are important for water quality and our drainage system. Typically, they're not used for recreational use when they're found within neighborhoods, and these will be represented as blue. And lastly, parks, buffers, and open spaces will be represented as shades of green. Parks are important for our recreation amenities for neighborhoods and for larger communities, and can be either passive, think Ritchie Woods, which is pictured here, or active parks, think maybe Brook School Park, where you see like a playground. Buffering is typically done between different land uses and along thoroughfares and includes heavy landscaping. In general, open space areas are between homes and commercial uses, and they help with the pedestrian connectivity. So on concept A, each concept will have a name and we'll refer to that as that. So concept A is called a new subdivision. These concepts are for the purpose of obtaining feedback from the community and are not intended to reflect the desired use for the development. This concept includes approximately 114 single-family homes, as well as amenity center for those residents, recreational facilities such as multiple courts or fields, and a trail system that would connect all residents to the greater area. This concept also includes a new community park along Thorpe Creek, which is in a floodway, an area that's harder to develop, and with walking trails that would connect Britton Falls, located on the east, and Hunter's Run, located on the west. Existing trees and tree lines in the area would be incorporated into tree conservation areas, open space, and the park system. The neighborhood would likely have at least 2 entrances along Cynthia Ann or 136th Street. And on this concept, approximately 70% of the development is residential, while 30% of the development is parks and open space.
Great, thanks, Ross. And I do want to point out that I wouldn't get too caught up in maybe the details of this concept plan. It really is just to show some general land usage. So we have that single family residential in yellow, and then the open space, excuse me, with those walking trail features really on the south side of this development. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll of collecting feedback. So there is going to be some questions about how you feel this concept would fit in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that survey now. Hopefully you all can see that. And I'll give you a few minutes just because there are several questions with this to answer these questions. And I will also mention there's an other option on questions 2 and 3. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't allow us to type in any other for that other category for you to type in your own feature. But at the end of this meeting, we're going to all send you a URL link to a survey that does allow you the option to type in any additional comments that you have on it. So just know that you will be able to do that after the meeting. All right, it looks like we have about 83 people who have answered these questions, which was about what we had on that first poll. I know some people are calling in, so I want to make sure I give everyone enough time, but for the sake of moving on, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and publish the results just so we can all see. So it looks like it's about split with if we felt that this was a suitable use for the area. 45% said yes, 55% said no. So a little bit more of you felt that this was not a good use. Looking at the different features, the open space, tree conservation, and walking trails had the most were the features that were liked the most. About 60% of you agreed that you liked those features. 30% liked the homes, and about a little bit less with the recreation and neighborhood amenity center. Looking at the features that you didn't like, I would say single family homes was the most, and then about 40% said that there was nothing you didn't like about this concept plan. So great. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to concept B. Oh, actually, before we do that, I'm going to go ahead. Were there any questions related to that concept plan or that process, Ross, that we can go ahead and answer?
Yeah, we had a couple questions specifically about that concept. Mary asked, what would the price range of these single family homes be?
So the price range is really going to depend on the builder that would propose this type of development. But again, there is no proposed builder for this area. So purely hypothetical. Home prices, though, are dictated by the builder. Can you ask that one more time, Ross?
Yeah, so the property closest to the roundabout, they asked why that wasn't included in the concepts.
Gotcha. So that property is currently being used as a single family residence. And so we just felt that really for the purposes of this conversation, we didn't want to show someone's home who's living there shown on this concept plan. So again, this is hypothetical, but we did choose to leave that off just because it's an existing residence today.
And before we move on, Jamie asked, in relation to the land that we're talking about tonight, where is the proposed multi-unit apartment complex located? I think the one that you mentioned earlier, that's going to Plan Commission.
Yeah, so in relation to what the area we're looking at tonight, that proposed development is going to be up here on the northern part of the property. So you see this white line here. That would be the. All right, any other questions, Ross, before we move on?
No, I think we can move on to concept B.
Okay. All right.
Great, thanks. Concept B is called neighborhood services. And again, these concepts are for the purpose of obtaining feedback, not the intended use of the desired area. This concept includes approximately 116 residential units, around the same as the previous concept, but this is a mix of housing types. You'd see 26 single family homes in the yellow, approximately 60 attached rear loaded townhomes. You see those in the orange, and around 30 detached cottage homes around a common green. You'll see those also in orange. We'll see approximately 84,000 square feet of commercial space. That's in the red. That could serve this neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods and would include commercial retail, commercial medical, or small offices. You'll also see similar walking trails connecting to the surrounding neighborhoods. You'll see the tree conservation with the community park along Thorpe Creek. This neighborhood would likely have at least 3 entrances. And approximately 50% of the development is remaining residential. 30% of it would be parks and open space, and 20% of this would be commercial.
Great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll associated with this one. It's a very similar format to the last one, but the features are a bit different just because of the use has changed.
Megan, I had one question here that's kind of a statement that I wanted to share. It's with Christine, and they live in Britton Falls, and they said it's very difficult to ride my bike outside of my neighborhood. I would like connecting sidewalks and or bike lanes to commercial sites.
Great,
I think
thank you,
that's
Ross.
a great point, and when we're looking at these type of developments, we'll definitely be looking at pedestrian connectivity. Megan, do we know who currently owns the land? That's another question we've gotten.
So I don't know who owns both pieces of property. They are owned by separate individuals. I do know that. But no, I'm not familiar with, I know that we have that information on the assessors off from the assessment on the assessor's office through Hamilton County. But I wasn't familiar with, they were both investment companies, it looked like.
Correct. Yeah, they both listed as private LLCs. So.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share the results. So from the breakdown of is this a suitable use for the area? Again, we had 45% said yes and 55% said no. As expected, the open space didn't really change on this one. So about 50% of people really like those features. With this one though, commercial retail also was an ideal feature of this concept plan. Single family and townhome / the mix of housing types was a little bit less. And then what disliked was that townhomes mix of housing, as we would likely see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the last and final concept plan that we have tonight. So Ross, if you want to go ahead and let's go ahead and go through concept C, and then I'll answer the Q&A after this.
Sure. So concept C is called commercial only. You'll see that we're only showing red on the screen right now. Again, these concepts are just for the purpose of obtaining feedback from you guys tonight. This concept C is around 4 times the amount of commercial space that concept B showed, and would likely be a town center and Main Street style design that includes around 325,000 square feet of commercial space available and would serve the surrounding neighborhoods with services including retail, medical office, and small big box retailers. You will see similar walking trails, connections to the surrounding neighborhoods, and tree conservation areas, again with that community park along Thorpe Creek, as well as open space amenities throughout the town center style shopping area. This is a little different from the other ones, where approximately 70% of the development is considered commercial, while 30% of the development is parks and open space.
Great, thanks, Ross. And I'll go ahead and launch the poll for this one as well. So if you all want to take a second to look at this and answer these questions. Ross, any questions in the Q&A that we can answer while we're going?
Yeah, got a couple. Would the interchange and commercial uses north of this site on 136 affect the desirability for residential on 136th Street? I think they're talking about the interchange again, the potential interchange with NDOT.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sure. Would the interchange in commercial uses north of this site on 136 affect the desirability for residential on 136th Street?
Yeah, I would say that any development in this area is probably going to impact any future development. So if we did see, for example, new development happen north of here, I would expect that to impact how we look at the area south of that development.
Mary asked, years ago, they heard that this might be an assisted living place. Is that off the table?
We have not heard of any plans for an assisted living facility on this area. I've been here for 5 years, so within the last 5 years, I have not heard of any proposed development such as that. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and we'll answer questions here in just a second. So for this concept plan, it looks like about 60% of those participating said that yes, you did feel that this was a suitable use for the area. So that's the fully commercial. Features that you liked, again, that open space, which we would anticipate to see. Oh, I just saw you can't see it. Here you go. Here's that 60%. 40% said no. Those open space features, again, about 50%, which is anticipated as it has remained the same. Commercial retail and the commercial medical office, it looks like ideally a few more of you like the retail than the medical or the office. And then about 35% said no residential you liked. And then down here, not many features that you didn't like, other than some did not feel like the commercial retail or medical office, about 30% did not feel like that was a good fit, which aligns with the 40% that said no. So there we go. Thank you all for participating in that. That's great to get that feedback as we review these various concept plans. So the final question here, and we are going to answer the Q&A, but I do want to get through these poll results for those on the call. The final poll that we have is really just the comparison between concept A, concept B, and concept C. So the last poll that we're going to launch is really which one out of these three do you feel are best suited for this area? So if you want to go ahead and answer this last and final question, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the Q&A for the rest of tonight's time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So it looks like out of all three concepts, the one that had the most was the final concept plan, the commercial only, with about 43%. Concept A and B were tied with 20% of those on the call feeling like that was the best suited for that area. And then 13% felt like really none of these were best suited for this area. So thank you all. It's a new feature that we're using, so it's good to see that we got some good participation there. So Ross, I'll go ahead and see if we've got any questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a couple of questions from earlier that we didn't have time to answer. Paul asked, do we anticipate that I-69 and State Road 13 will be a regional retail draw?
Potentially, it's hard to say. Really, that's going to depend on market factors, on whether we have commercial develop in that area, but it is outside of Fisher's jurisdiction. So for land use planning, it's not something that we would have a stake in considering.
Sure. Gary asked earlier, how is the runoff of water from structures controlled? It appears that all the excess water goes to Thorpe Creek and it's filled to its banks at a heavy rain.
Yeah, so with any new development, we require stormwater detention requirements. And so you'll see either if there's natural runoff, depending on the size of the development, we require storm pipes, and then on-site or off-site detention. And so that is handled through our engineering and public works department. So I can't speak to the specifics of that, but we do have a stormwater ordinance that has to be met with any new development where we look at the stormwater runoff.
Good. I had a couple additional questions about 136th Street. And so if you go to a link that we provided in the chat, which is capital projects, which is part of our engineering department, they have a section about 136th Street widening from Perry Baptist to Cynthian Road, as well as Perry Baptist to Southeastern Parkway. And it says right now that the estimated start of that construction is fall of 2023. But if you go to mapfishers.in.us/capital projects, you can find all about engineering projects that are happening, including the widening of 136th Street.
And I would also encourage anyone who hasn't signed up for the Drive Fishers updates. So if you go to our public website, there will be a link to Drive Fishers, and that is our engineering's public outreach for any capital projects or road improvement projects that are happening. And so that's really the best way to stay informed on any road projects throughout the city.
Great. Donna asked, what is a cottage home? Is it possible to go back to that slide, Megan?
Yeah, let me go ahead and pan through here. Yeah, so a cottage home is one that is front loaded from the presence of the home, but the garage is in the back. And so if you think of like an alley loaded home, that is what we would consider a cottage home. And that could be attached or detached. So some examples here, one is Anderson Hall. So these are garages are facing the rear of the home. And then this is an attached product, which is in Saxony, which could be considered a townhome or a cottage home. So it's a little bit higher density, I guess I would say, a single family residential.
Let's see, a couple more. All three plans include a park. Is a park the plan, and would we get to provide input on the park features that we would like to see?
So if it was a public city park, typically our parks department does do outreach to the local community to see what amenities they would like to incorporate in there. If it was a part of a private development, let's say that developer was going to retain ownership, or that property owner was going to retain ownership, and we might not necessarily have the same level of public outreach, but certainly if there are features that you would like to see, please feel free to reach out to that planning at fishers.in.us, and we can relay that back to our parks department, because they are always looking for feedback on what type of amenities residents like to see in this area.
Karen asked a similar question. Will we have an opportunity to propose uses for this land that were not mentioned in tonight's meeting?
Yes. So after this meeting wraps up, you'll get a link sent to you. And it was also included in the chat, I believe it was that fishers.in.us 136 neighborhood meeting. And that will take you to a page where there is a survey. In that survey, there'll be the exact same questions that we saw here tonight, but there'll also be links for you to provide any additional comments on features that weren't included in these proposals. So certainly go ahead and fill that out and include anything that wasn't included in tonight's presentation.
All right. We had a couple questions outside of tonight's meeting, but do we know what is planned for the north side of 136th Street is a question.
So as of right now, that property, most of those properties are zoned R2 residential. Our office has not received any plans for development in that area.
And Jeff and Patty asked how many acres we're looking at tonight. And it is around 54 acres. Megan, that was the majority of the questions tonight.
Well, great. Well, let me pan here to the final slide. I just want to make sure that everyone on the call has this URL, and I believe Ross posted it to the chat as well. So this recording will be available starting tomorrow at this web address. And then again, there'll also be a survey there with the same questions that were tonight. So we did record those results of tonight. Feel free to provide any additional feedback through that survey. And then that recording and that comment feature will stay up until February 28th. So any feedback that you have, we would request it by that meeting date. I do appreciate you all being on the call tonight. Thank you. I do love that this virtual feature is an option. We've seen a lot higher participation rates with virtual meetings. So thank you all for participating. We appreciate it greatly.